So this short story by O. Henry is titled After 20 Years, and we will answer 3 comprehension questions on the story when we finish. So first we meet a police officer on his beat. That just means where the cop is assigned to do his walk. We learn that it is a rainy, cold night at 10 a.m. So people might be bundled up and cold here. That is going to be important to notice. And the police officer comes across a man with an unlighted cigar. And the man is going to say that he is waiting for an appointment he made 20 years ago. And then he goes on to tell him that he was supposed to meet his friend, Jimmy Wells, at this assigned location. And here we have him striking this match. So that would have lit up his face on this dark corner. And then the police officer says, it sounds interesting. You haven't heard from your friend. He said they had lost touch with each other. And we learned that the man went out west. Maybe like this could be considered maybe the Wild Wild West or somewhere in the Midwest. However he went, he left Chicago. The diamonds. We could see that as something symbolic. It shows he's obviously wealthy if he has this diamond watch. And the cop even notices, saying, you did pretty well out west. And he says, I've had to compete with some of the sharpest whip to get my pile. A man gets in his groove. It takes the west to put a razor edge on him. That's a little kind of weird way to say it. Razor edge, meaning maybe he was doing things that one shouldn't have been doing. And at that point, the cop is going to walk away. So then we have, is that you, Bob? Now we learn that our stranger on the street, his name is Bob. And he has come across his friend, Jimmy, except a little weird here. He's going to comment how tall Jimmy got. And Jimmy says, I grew a bit after I was 20. That is not normal, usually. People stop growing in their late teens. Or in their like mid-teens, you could say. So we definitely have a little mystery there. We could call that foreshadowing, because as we go on, as they turn the corner, brilliant electric lights. Once again, this idea of the light in on a dark night. And we say 20 years is a long time, but not enough to change a man's nose from a Roman to a pug. So pugs are dogs with flat noses, and Romans are dogs with really long snouts. So that it would be a metaphor telling us that this guy looks totally different from Jimmy Wells. And then we learn it sometimes changes a good man into a bad one. You've been under arrest, Silky Bob. Chicago may have dropped over our way and wires us she wants to have a chat with you. So a wire would be like they sent their police station a warrant poster with Bob's face on it. And he says then he also hands him a note from Patrolman Wells. So we learn that Jimmy is a cop. And the note says, I was at the appointed place on time. When you struck the match to light your cigar, I saw it was the face of the man wanted in Chicago. Somehow I couldn't bring myself to do it, so I ran around and got a plainclothes man to do the job. And that's going to tell us that the cop was actually Jimmy. And you could say that shows how the setting influences the story quite a bit. So if we're going to look at our first question here, how does the theme of loyalty influence the decisions of Jimmy and Bob in their reunion after 20 years? Well, here we could say loyalty profoundly shapes the actions of both Jimmy Wells and Bob. Bob demonstrates the loyalty of the friendship by traveling thousands of miles to honor a pact made 20 years earlier, waiting at the agreed upon spot despite the passage of time and his life as a fugitive. So a fugitive would be somebody on the run from the law. His commitment reflects a nostalgic fidelity to their past bond. Basically, just that would be his saying, like, he was the staunchest chap, but you could also say that's ironic because he had called him loyal, but now Jimmy's loyalties have changed. Jimmy, however, faces a conflict between personal loyalty to his friend and his duty as a police officer. Recognizing Bob as a wanted criminal, Silky Bob, Jimmy chooses professional loyalty over personal ties, arranging for another officer to arrest Bob while avoiding direct confrontation. You could actually say that, like, maybe Jimmy was a little bit loyal to Bob, in his mind at least, because he didn't want to be the one that arrested his friend here. So we have the decision underscores Jimmy's integrity, but also his inability to betray his role, even for an old friend. They're contrasting expressions of loyalty. Bob's to friendship and Jimmy's to duty drive the story's emotional tension and resolution. So that resolution would be our ending here. And then we have, what role does the setting of New York play in shaping the atmosphere? Definitely the nighttime. That is what builds the story's irony, really. But we can say New York City's setting creates a moody, impersonal backdrop that amplifies the story's theme of change and isolation. You have a rainy, chilly night, but its nearly deserted streets evoke a sense of melancholy and transience, mirroring the characters' drifted apart lives. The urban environment, with its bustling yet anonymous nature, reflects the transformation of the city and the men over the 20 years. As the restaurant they once made their pact has been replaced by a hardware store. So you could say a restaurant is like a place of, socializing, comfort, food, whereas a hardware store, well, it even sounds like the name. We could say this change symbolizes the erosion of their past connection. Additionally, the city's size and complexity provides a plausible context for Jimmy's role as a patrolling officer and Bob's ability to hide as a fugitive, facilitating the story's twist or ironic ending. The dark, wet streets also heighten the suspense, setting the stage for a dramatic revelation. You could also say the rain kind of makes it a little sad that these two guys used to be friends and now it works out like this. So for this one, as long as you were saying something about the streets being empty is sort of important too because of the fugitive part, but most definitely the fact that it's at nighttime. That is a big part of building this irony because at first when Jimmy, the cop, walked up to him, he was talking to Bob for a little while until Bob lit a cigarette or a cigar, and then Jimmy walks away. And then also, they were walking and talking, and we know Bob didn't even notice that his friend grew in height. But once they passed that electric light and he could see his face, he realized it definitely was not his friend. We have foreshadowing and irony here because our foreshadowing, that's going to be when it says Bob's description of Jimmy as steadfast, reliable, would never forget their pact, hinting that Jimmy would indeed show up, though not as he expects. The policeman Jimmy's lingering conversation with Bob is thus his scrutiny of Bob's face in the matchlight subtly suggests he recognizes Bob's criminal identity, preparing readers for later in this action. So that foreshadowing of Jimmy seeing Bob's face with the matchlight, that foreshadowed our ironic ending that he had saw him. The irony is both situational and dramatic. Bob waits eagerly for his friend, unaware that the friend is a policeman who identifies him as a wanted man. The twist reveals that Jimmy, loyal to his duty, orchestrates Bob's arrest by sending another officer, a fact disclosed through the note Bob receives. The ironic reversal, where the anticipated joyful reunion becomes an arrest, shocks Bob and underscores the conflict between personal loyalty and moral obligation, leaving readers to ponder the bittersweet outcome. You could say we know maybe Jimmy probably does feel bad, maybe a little bit, but overall he hadn't seen the guy in 20 years, so he probably, and maybe who knows, he might have gotten a promotion or something like that. So our irony is the ending when we, the reader, and Bob find out that his friend is there to arrest him. And the foreshadowing is that dark night when the police officer lights his cigar. We could also add to this, the foreshadowing, you could also say the diamond watch. If we're going to add here, we could say here, you could say Bob's diamond encrusted watch also foreshadows the idea that Bob could be involved in criminal activities. Not that that's totally abnormal, but just the fact that we did see it, it was mentioned, and then we do learn he is a criminal. So when you look at it that way, that's why we can say it's foreshadowing, because he does indeed end up being a criminal. And so it would make sense that he had flashy things or very costly things, especially compared to Jimmy, who was a city employee working on like a police salary. So in comparison, the diamond watch is definitely something that could foreshadow Bob's criminal behaviors in his life. So those would be 3 comprehension questions for O. Henry's short story, After 20 Years.